The Crusades. When we hear that word, images come to mind. Armored knights riding under the blazing sun, red crosses painted on their shields, marching thousands of miles to Jerusalem. The church called it a holy war, a mission from God to reclaim the Holy Land from Muslim control. But behind that noble call, behind the prayers and banners, there was a far more complicated and human story, one driven not just by faith, but by power, politics, and greed. To understand the real reason behind the Crusades, we need to step back into the world of the 11th century. Europe at that time was a land of confusion. It was fractured into dozens of small kingdoms, each ruled by warlords and feudal lords constantly fighting over land. There was no unity, no peace, and very little wealth. The Church, the most powerful institution in Europe, saw this chaos as both a threat and an opportunity. Pope Urban II, the man who launched the First Crusade in 1095, wanted to unite these divided Christian warriors under one purpose, but his goal was not purely spiritual. He wanted to direct their violence outward, away from Europe, toward a common enemy. The Middle East was the perfect target. It was home to the city of Jerusalem, the most sacred place in Christianity. By calling for its liberation, the Pope could turn endless local wars into one holy cause that served both God and the Church's political ambitions.
Before we continue, please like and subscribe to this channel so you won't miss any historical facts and mysteries we upload here.
When the Pope called upon the knights of Christendom to take up the cross, he promised forgiveness of sins and eternal salvation. This was a powerful offer. In a time when people believed deeply in heaven and hell, the idea that dying in battle could guarantee salvation was irresistible. Thousands of men, from noble knights to poor peasants, answered the call. But not all of them were driven by faith. Many saw the crusade as a way to gain wealth, fame, and land. The Middle East was not just the Holy Land, it was also the center of the world's most profitable trade routes. Goods from Asia, silk, spices, precious stones passed through the region to reach Europe. Whoever controlled that land controlled enormous economic power. Europe, in comparison, was poor. The Crusades were therefore not only a mission for God, but also an opportunity for expansion, to claim land and riches that Europe desperately needed. The idea of a holy war gave kings and knights a moral excuse for conquest. Instead of being condemned for greed, they were praised for piety. Nobles who were second or third sons, with little inheritance at home, saw the Crusades as a path to fortune. They could carve out their own kingdoms in the East. This is why the First Crusade led not just to the capture of Jerusalem, but also to the creation of new Christian states, the Crusader kingdoms across the Middle East. But there was also another layer of politics. At that time, the Christian world was split between the Western Church, ruled by the Pope in Rome, and the Eastern Church, centered in Constantinople under the Byzantine Emperor. The two branches had broken apart in what was known as the Great Schism of 1054. When the Byzantine Empire came under threat from Turkish Muslim forces, Emperor Alexios I sent a desperate message to the Pope asking for help. Urban II saw more than just a chance to defend fellow Christians. He saw a political opportunity to expand the influence of the Roman Catholic Church into the East, and perhaps reunite the two churches under his leadership. The Crusades, then, became a tool not only to fight Islam, but also to strengthen the power of the papacy. The Pope's influence grew enormously after he called for the Crusades. For the first time, kings and nobles across Europe were united under the Church's command. It showed the world that the Pope could command armies and direct the course of nations, something that had never been done before. And yet, the Crusades also exposed how human ambition can twist faith into a weapon. Many of the so-called holy warriors committed horrific acts, massacres, looting, and destruction in the name of God. When the First Crusaders finally captured Jerusalem in 1099, they slaughtered tens of thousands of Muslims and Jews. The city that was supposed to be sacred turned into a river of blood. What began as a spiritual mission ended as an act of human greed and vengeance. But the story didn't stop there. Over the next 2 centuries, there would be 8 major crusades. Some were fought to defend Christian territories, others to gain more. Later, crusades were even directed at fellow Christians, such as the infamous Fourth Crusade in 1204, when Crusaders attacked and looted Constantinople, the greatest Christian city of the East. This act proved that the Crusades were no longer about faith. They had become a political and economic enterprise, dressed in the robes of religion. Another important reason behind the Crusades was control over trade. The Italian city-states, like Venice and Genoa, became incredibly rich by transporting crusaders and trading goods with the East. These cities realized that war could be profitable. Every ship carrying knights also carried merchants. The Crusades opened up routes and connections that later fueled the European Renaissance. In a strange way, what started as a war for the Holy Land eventually sparked Europe's age of wealth and exploration. We must also understand the psychological power of religion in that era. People believed that the world was under constant spiritual battle, good versus evil. The Crusades gave people a sense of purpose and belonging. For peasants living in poverty, for knights seeking redemption, and for rulers chasing power, the idea of fighting for God justified everything. The church knew this. It used powerful sermons, vivid stories, and emotional preaching to stir up passion. Priests would tell people that Muslims had desecrated Christian holy sites and were killing pilgrims, stories that were often exaggerated or false, but effective. Propaganda was as strong then as it is now. In the end, the Crusades were not one simple thing. They were a mix of genuine faith, greed, fear, and ambition. The church wanted power. The kings wanted land. The merchants wanted trade. The people wanted salvation. And all of them found what they were looking for, at least for a time. The Crusades failed to permanently hold Jerusalem, but they changed history forever. They opened contact between East and West, spreading knowledge, trade, and culture. They also left deep wounds, centuries of mistrust and conflict between religions. But most of all, they revealed something timeless about human nature, that the line between belief and ambition is very thin. So when we talk about the Crusades, we shouldn't see them only as wars of faith. They were wars of opportunity, where religion was the banner, but power was the prize. And that, more than anything else, is the real reason behind the Crusades.